Today's episode is made possible in part by our sponsors, including Salt and Light Eye Care. Thanks to New Mexico's faith-based boutique practice for expert vision care and advanced aesthetics and treatments. From eye exams to dry eye therapy, they help you see and shine with purpose. Dr. Mindy and her team go above and beyond. Plus, every visit helps support missions near and far. Learn more at saltandlighteyecare.com. My guest today is Liz Vasquez, wife, mom of two amazing boys, and co-pastor of Journey Church in Winter Park, Florida, which she founded with her husband, JJ. Together, they've built a life and ministry that's honest, faith-filled, and full of purpose. Liz's story is powerful, marked by deep loss, resilient faith, and the kind of grace that can only come from God. Stay tuned. Well, thank you, Liz, so much for joining me on Table Talks today. Honestly, I'm so looking forward to this.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh gosh, I mean, so the listeners know we met maybe a year and a half ago at a conference at Citizen Church in Albuquerque. I'd heard so much about you and your husband, JJ, and all the amazing things that Journey Church has done in the Orlando area. But to meet you in person, you just have the kindest, sweetest spirit, and just you exude joy, and that. Then this second time I got to be with you, I thought, oh my gosh, I want to have her on this podcast because there's not enough of you in the world, and people need to grab that unique gift that you have that is joy, and in a world that doesn't have a lot. So thank you again for saying yes. And in the intro, I talked about a little bit of your story with my mom and all of that. So I won't repeat all that, but we're going to find out a little bit what your life is like now, but tell me a little bit about your past. Like, how did you come to know Jesus? How did you grow up?
Well, before we even get into that, I just want to say thank you for having me here. The first time I met you a year and a half ago was because my husband preached at your church. And I don't know if you remember, but I found out who you were and I grabbed a hold of you and I'm like, I could tell that this woman is wise. And I think we stayed in the back and spoke for, I want to say like 45 minutes. I felt so bad because I'm like, I don't know where she has to be, but I want to talk to you. And I fell in love with you. And so I've loved you ever since. I have your cookbook. I can't lie, I have not cooked anything from it.
But it's so pretty.
It is pretty. It's in my kitchen, but I've learned so much from you from afar. So thank you for that. We have our family dinners, not once a week, but once a month, and it's because of you. So I had to just let you know that you've made a big impact in my life.
And thank you for saying that. Honestly, I really felt that connection. And I mean, just right away. And, our age is decades apart. We're different generations, but I love that about community and faith in Christ, because generations come together and we can be buddies and friends and pour into each other. I learn from you, and hopefully you can learn from me. And that's the beauty of this Table Talks podcast too, is that we learn each other's stories. And I love that we can gather around a table and we can get to know each other better and become better friends. So again, thank you for saying that. That's awfully kind. And in my mind, you're just this wonderful pastor of this great church, and that's where it started. But I know, like I mentioned a moment ago, it had to start somewhere else. So where did you grow up at? So I grew up here in Florida. People think I'm from New York because my husband's from New York, but I'm not. I'm a Floridian, born and raised. A little bit of my background, my dad was a pastor. And so I grew up in ministry all my life. I want to say I got saved for the first time as a teenager, but then I walked away from the Lord for a little while. And some of my backstory is just, being really transparent. I'm just super transparent, just so you know, really honest about my life. And so my father was a pastor. And I walked away from the faith for a little bit just because being in ministry was tough for me, because it was really hard for me to see my dad minister to these people, and those same people that he poured his life into
would sometimes walk away from the church or say bad things about my father. And so I had a really hard time as a teenager reconciling how is God so good, but then his people do these things to my dad and my family. And so it was really hard for me growing up seeing that. But then as a teenager, growing up, but then I got older in my 20s, my early 20s is when I realized I'm broken too. And then I realized that that's why church is so important because church people are not perfect. And so sometimes they make mistakes, but I'm included in that. And so I realized that I needed a relationship with God. And I could sit here and tell you my life story, but I won't take too long. It was a car accident that I got into that really like scared me because I got into this car accident and then I went to a youth camp probably about 2 weeks later. And the guy that was preaching, he did not know that I had got into a car accident. I mean, you can kind of tell a little bit, but he had no idea. And at the end of the service, he came and prayed over me and he spoke over my life and told me that he literally said these words. He said, you were just in a car accident. He had no way of knowing this. And he said, but God saved your life because he has a big purpose for you. And at that point, I realized like, oh my gosh, like God sees me and he sees where I'm at and he knows about all this, but he wants to save my life. And I was so bound at that point because I had in that time span had gotten into a lot of things that a pastor's kid probably should not have gotten into, which included drugs and alcohol and partying. And I just remember saying, but God, okay, so fine, I want to serve you, but I'm so bound. Like, how do I get out of this? Like, I've just learned how to live this way, how to cope this way. Like, if I'm sad, then I smoke and I drink and I do all these things. But how do I get rid of all of that to the point where I got in my car and I wanted to play some music that was probably not very edifying for me. And I'm like, I stopped and I was like, okay, but I don't know how to do this. And soon after, I found this church, got involved in this church, and that was the thing that changed it for me. And so for me, that's why church is so important because my husband and I, we're so passionate about it because we're able to create a space for people who are trying to figure it out. Like, how do I get closer to God? And it was that moment when I realized, okay, God, this is what I need. I need you and community, which is a church. And from there, it's history.
I love that. And just getting a quick version of your story before pre being married and everything. But what you're saying is so true. We think, and people think, I run into people every day. I love to meet people and talk to them when I'm out and about during the day. And they find out that I'm a pastor or, we were in ministry, and then they all of a sudden want to think they've got to act a certain way and talk a certain way.
Yes.
And I know people think that, like, I want to go
Yes.
to church, but I don't want to clean it all up. I don't know how to, and I don't really know if I want to. But invitation, what you're saying is what I love is a really thriving, godly church community says we take you like you are, we want you like you are, but more than that, God wants you like you are.
Exactly.
And the rest of it just take care of itself. It will take care of it, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I love that so much. And this is not about my story, but I had a similar, my parents weren't pastors, but they were, I've been in church my whole life, but during my teen years, I was extremely rebellious and off the right track. And I love that we serve a God, and our God of the universe, he will do what he needs to do and put us in situations to bring him to him.
Yeah. Yep. And I know it's my praying grandmother, my praying mother, my praying father that got me here because it was a wild ride. I went through so much.
I love that we're not the people, we're not the person that we thought we were going to be, that God, kept us on the path. And I love that he does that for us. So so I didn't know you were in a car wreck. A lot of this stuff, I mean, I don't know, have not known about you, but what's something that about you that nobody would have any idea? It doesn't have to be,
So
really, what's something we don't know about you?
yeah, something you don't know. It's hard because I'm just so honest. Every time I preach, speak, anytime people ask me questions, like I'm one of those people like I don't have any secrets because I'll tell you everything. I have nothing to hide. But I would say one thing would be maybe that I struggle sometimes with perfectionism. I'm a number one, I think it is on the Enneagram. I recently found out that my husband's the number one too. So yeah, just pray for our kids because I homeschool my kids too. And I'm like, whenever they get their grades, I'm like, I think you could do better than that. So
Well, that's
sometimes that's the
good.
struggle. Yeah, I know, I know. And I'm aware of it now, especially now that I know my husband's like that too. That I'm like, okay, simmer down. It's okay that that didn't come out the way you thought it would. And so I think that's the biggest, that would be for me, my struggle. Even when we started the church, little things I would see wrong, and I'm like, I'm making a list over here, and I'm like, but I gotta like understand that not everything can be fixed right away. And then maybe something else that people don't know. It's funny you asked this because just yesterday, I found a picture on my phone, and it was my dad and my two sisters, and one of my sisters was sitting on a pony. And this pony was in my backyard. Okay, so you know how when little kids say, I want a pony? Well, my dad bought my sisters a pony. That was the kind of like that was my childhood. Yes,
We
my
asked our
it's
kids that, but we don't mean that we want to buy you a pony.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, we had an extra acre in the backyard. He bought the pony. And so when I think about that, I'm like, well, why is that so significant? Because my dad was the kind of person that, I mean, yes, he spoiled us, so that kind of played into my marriage. When we first got married, my husband's like, I can give you everything you want. But more importantly, my dad showed me that nothing is impossible. Like, like you want a pony, I can make that happen, but the same thing with God, like in ministry, I feel like that's helped because it could hurt in some ways, but it's helped because when we started the church, there's so many things that God puts in our heart that sometimes we're like, but that seems so impossible. But my dad always taught me like, no, with God, everything is possible. Like if just do your part, try your best. If it doesn't come out, then fine. If it doesn't happen, fine. Then maybe that's not what God wanted, but at least try, risk it. Because with him, all things are possible. And so I think that would be maybe something else that people don't know. I grew up and my sisters had a pony. Just
That's so cool.
wild.
So
We
I've
had other pets too,
always
but
known,
that was the wildest one.
I don't know. So is JJ, I feel like he's outgoing because he speaks, but which one of you or is one more outgoing than the other?
Yes.
Or
Yeah, so my husband, people don't know this because he does so well on stage. He's actually an introvert, and I am the extrovert. So when we go out, I'm the one at the gym talking to people about God, inviting them to church. He's like, I'm gonna go do my workout. I'll see you later. Like,
he's so expressive and demonstrative
yes,
and just a big personality when he's preaching.
yes,
So it's just,
yes.
I mean, that's just hard for me to believe because I would
Yes,
think
it's so hard for people to believe it.
both of you would be. So he's more the introvert and you're more of the
Yes.
extrovert, which
Hmm.
there has to be one of each in a marriage because I
Yes,
don't think we couldn't survive two of me in a
right.
marriage
Same.
because I'm always talking to everybody in every line,
Exactly.
everywhere. And my husband's
Yeah,
like,
same.
you have to talk to everybody. And I'm like, I do
Yes,
actually.
I
I
do
do.
too.
I want to talk
Oh, sometimes I'm like, I hope I'm not annoying this person in this line. I just really like talking to people.
right? What if you don't talk to someone and I feel like, and I miss this important God moment I'm supposed to have
Yes,
because I
exactly.
didn't say something. So you've
Yes,
talked about, so your mom and dad, are they still living? Do you have a,
yes,
that's awesome. And
yes,
what kind of, you mentioned your dad, taught you could do anything. And how about your
yeah.
mom? Was she a mentor in your life? Did you have women mentors in your life?
Yes, definitely my mom, I would consider a mentor only because she did what I'm doing now, if you think about it. She was a pastor's wife. So my father was, for a small moment, he was a lead pastor. He was usually like the executive pastor, associate pastor. But my mom was a pastor's wife. And so she's just one of those people who she's very quiet. Like her and I are not the same in that I am not quiet. But she's one of those people that when she speaks, you listen because she doesn't speak a lot. And she'll hold her tongue and she'll wait till I have to say this. This is really important. And so she taught me a lot, especially when it comes to being a submissive wife, because I have such a strong personality like my father. And so when I got married to JJ, I did have, that's part of, my story. I did have a little bit of issue with submission in the beginning with him. And my mom, I would tell her stories of what was happening, and she was always correcting me. And I
That's
could receive it
amazing.
from her because that's my mom, you know? And she would tell me, honey, yeah, she would tell me, honey, you need to, maybe I wouldn't say that. Maybe I would be more careful.
You know, the mentoring thing that we use the word so, readily now, the word mentor, but I'm from a whole different generation. I'm a baby boomer, which is crazy. I can't believe I'm that old. But so when I was a teenager, we didn't talk about mentoring. There were older ladies in the church or other people in the church. And so because it wasn't a buzzword then, but still I caught things. That's the
Yeah,
thing. Nobody sat and taught me like this is the word of God. Or I wasn't discipled by a book or having a one-on-one with someone, but their lives taught me by
yeah,
watching their life.
exactly.
And I think so much of that, where we're raising children or we're pouring into the next generation spiritually, so many things can be caught. I
Yes,
just as well or as being taught,
yes,
that just
agree.
I hope you could follow my life, right? You would hope that someone could follow your life and do what you do and pick up enough good that they could find Christ
Yes,
in the whole.
exactly.
So I think
Yeah,
that's wonderful that you had a godly mom. So many, excuse me, people that listen to this podcast weren't raised.
yeah,
Uh, they're maybe their first generation Christian, so they didn't have that person in their life. So that's great that our churches, the modern church now has a space for mentoring and mentorship, and there's small groups and Bible studies and
yeah,
programs that can do that. So that would be my encouragement to someone listening that thinks I don't have any of that. You know,
right.
I'm a millennial or I'm a Gen Z, and there's no one that has been in my life. But the great thing is we have that now,
Yes.
local body of Christ. I think that's amazing. So,
Yeah,
um,
I do believe too, added to that is that mentoring for me is not always just the person that's like, I'm related to or right here, like my mom, or I would say my grandmother, but somebody like you that from afar is mentored. I watched a podcast with you and your husband, and I learned so much from that. I learned from people from afar too, like from podcasts like this feels like mentoring to me. Like even when I listen to the other podcasts, and I'm not the one actually sitting there talking to you, but I'm learning from what you're talking about that I consider mentoring too. Like there's other forms of mentoring, like you said, small groups too, leaders in the church. Like it's when you put it all together, it really helps you. It doesn't have to be just from one person that you meet with weekly.
I love that. And that's so true. And that's, one of the reasons a year ago that I started this, because I felt like I had so much of life that has happened to me to this
Yeah.
point that I wanted to be able to maybe, interview amazing guests, and together we could come, help other people and
Yes.
next generation. I really have a heart for the next generation. And I know you guys do too. You've built this
Yeah.
amazing church from nothing, and you've seen God's faithfulness through your life, and just learning more about you over the last month or so by reading about you and looking up everything I can find to get to know you better. Because when someone comes in to speak at our church, we see the perfect couple. We see
Yeah.
Jay and Liz, and everything is amazing and it's perfect. But your journey in your life, in your married life, even has been, you've had some really big highs and some devastating lows. And one of those being you've shared openly about the loss of your son journey, which that story we'll talk about even more. But you that is an that is a gut wrencher. It really is, because, I was reading that you went in for just a regular doctor's appointment, and about halfway through your pregnancy. Tell us a little bit about that story with your son that you lost.
Yeah, so basically, when when I was 20 weeks pregnant, I thought I was just going in to find out the gender, and then I just remember the lady who was doing the sonogram was like, "Oh, I'll come back," and I'm like, "That's weird." And then we had to sit in the office with the doctor, which we never had to do. I've had two kids before with him as a doctor, and he let us know that our baby was not okay, that It looked like he had an enlarged heart. It was a long list of things. So he sent us to a specialist. And what was crazy was that weekend, my husband and I decided we were going to start the church. And that weekend, we were going to go to a church planting training, our first church planting training. And we get in the car after this doctor's visit that they tell us there's a bunch of things wrong. Like there was not even one name for what was going on. It was just a long list of, his heart is enlarged, his lungs are not formed. Like just, it was a whole long list. And then there's not a lot of amniotic fluid, so we can't see what's going on. And we get in the car after that doctor's visit, and my husband's like, babe, do you think that we should maybe not go to this church planning training? Because this is a lot to handle right now. And all I could think of was like, no, we're going, because I feel like the devil is attacking us so hard right now. And I want to punch him in the face, and I can't. So the only way I can is if I keep doing what God has called us to do. And it doesn't stop us. Like, of course, there's time to like mourn and all that, but I'm like, we got to keep doing this because this is what the devil would want, that we would allow this to slow us down. And so obviously we took longer in the process of starting the church because then, during that pregnancy, that I lost a baby. And it was, like you said, gut wrenching. It was so sad that we went through all that. But something that we learned from that was when all of that happened, the whole time I kept hoping that God would do a miracle in the way of healing my baby. Like I believed it 100%. And so when we gave birth to him, and which, by the way, the doctors kept telling us to abort the baby. They're like, he's going to pass away. So why go through this? Why keep carrying this baby? And almost every time I would go into the doctor's visits, it would be the same thing. You sure you don't? You could still do it. And I'm like, no, I need you guys to stop asking me this question, because he ended up living longer than what they thought he would. And I'm like, he's obviously fighting for his life because you guys thought he was going to be dead months ago. And so then I went all the way to full term, had a C-section. And and in my mind, I'm like, I will know for sure if this is really what's happening when I give birth to this child, because what if God decides to heal him? That's not what happened. He passed away 7 hours after I gave birth to him because his lungs weren't formed enough for him to breathe. That was one of the problems he had. And it was that I realized after all that the miracle wasn't that God healed my baby because he passed away. But the miracle was that God held us through all of that. Like I never fell into a depression. My relationship with God just got stronger. And the Bible talks about God being close to the brokenhearted. And so I realized like there's two things that happen. You can go two different ways when something like this happens. Either you could say, God, I hate you. I can't believe that you allowed this to happen to me. Or you could say, God, I can't do this without you. And you cling harder to him. Because like I said, the Bible talks about him being close to the brokenhearted. And I felt so close to God. My husband talks about being in the waiting room after I gave birth to him. They put him in a waiting room so they can wait to evaluate him. And at that point, he didn't know like what they were going to say. And he just preached about this last Sunday that he felt the presence of God, the most powerful like presence of God he has ever felt in that waiting room than in all of his life. And so God was so close to him in that moment. And we realized that the miracle was that God held us through this whole situation to where we didn't fall into a depression. God helped us financially. Like I had a long list of medical bills. God made a way with that. Like the list just goes on and on. People who got saved through his story. Like it was just so beautiful. We realized again the importance of community, because sometimes I would walk into the doctor's office and I couldn't go to these doctor's visits with my husband because they became so often. It was like every week they had to check. And so I remember going into these doctor's office feeling like I was not alone. Like so many people were praying for us. I literally felt like I was in the doctor's office with my whole church family, even though they weren't physically there, because I just felt peace. And so those were all the miracles that happened. And that's what God taught us, to the point where when we started the church, and we thought, man, this is going to be really hard. We're like, you know what? It's not going to be as hard as losing a child. So if we got through that with God, then we can get through this. And that's definitely what the miracles that came out of that.
Is it, listening to you thinking, going through grief or some huge tragedy, which, grief is the top of that list, it can do so much to your perspective. It can do something negative, like you mentioned, or it can catapult you to something greater. And it sounds like, with your story that you guys just took that grief and it affected your perspective, but in a positive.
Yeah.
And that is supernatural. There is no way humanly possible that you can lose a child that's 7 hours old or 8 hours old and be like, okay, that is a supernatural God thing that he wrapped you guys in a bubble, in bubble wrap. And so I'm going to help you get through this, and protect your heart as you grieve through this process.
And I'm not gonna lie, like in the beginning, I was mad at God. Like when it happened, there was moments that I remember sitting on my couch just crying, saying, "Why, God? Why would you allow this to happen?" Like I went through all of those emotions, but I think that's healthy. You got to be able to ask God why so that he can turn around and tell you, well, this is why, or to learn how to trust him. But the best way I could describe it is like, when you go bowling, but when you go with your kids and they put those guardrails up so the balls don't fall in the gutter, that's what it felt like. Like I never fell into the gutter, I sometimes I would veer off, but I never fell into that gutter because he just held us through the whole entire time.
I love that. Is an amazing analogy. Actually, that is such a good analogy. So, now it's been, a little while, it's been some years, but so I would imagine, so you started this church from scratch and you've experienced something like that to solidify God's faithfulness in your life. And you mentioned, okay, how hard can church planning be when I've walked through the grief, the valley of the shadow of death? Yeah. So what's faithfulness in your life? How do you, when you're going through everyday trials, do you go back to that story and remind yourself of this God's faithfulness? How does his faithfulness look like to you today?
Yeah, so 100%. I mean, there are times when things get difficult where we're like, I don't know how he's going to show up this time. Like, if I'm honest, just recently I found out that my mother has dementia.
This episode is also brought to you in part by the Dencklau team at Coldwell Banker Legacy Real Estate. Jason and Bree bring unmatched experience and a personal touch to every home journey. Start today at homebuyingabq.com. Hey friends, I'm so glad you're here. If you're enjoying this episode, please take a second to subscribe, leave a quick review, and share it with a friend. It's the best way for people to find the podcast and to be encouraged. Now, back to the conversation.
And that has been tough. And even with the grieving process of my son, like every time his birthday, which is also his death day, comes around, I cry and I'm sad and I still grieve him. I mean, I have to go to therapy that week every year, because it's just a reminder of it, and so I have to process it. But there's trials that still come now. And I have to remind myself, like, okay, remember though, God is here. This is a new trial, but it's the same God, And I started grieving again, if I'm honest, when I found out that my mother has dementia, because it's like it's a little bit different because you're grieving the loss of someone who's still alive, but they're slowly losing their mind. And so that's been really difficult because, like I shared earlier, I'm very close with my mother. So not being able to have the complete same relationship that I had with her before, just having to adjust, but remembering that he was faithful before and he'll be faithful again. And there's just going to be some new things that I learned from this. My oldest became a teenager. That's been a little wild. If I'm honest, that's crazy. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. But then I'm like, you know what? It's okay. God has my family. But these trials that I've been through, again, I do draw back from that and remember, like, God is going to get me through that, definitely.
And he surely does. I walked the path, the journey of dementia with my mom.
Okay.
And until you've walked that journey, it's hard to understand it because you lose them along the way. And then, when they eventually pass, but When I went through that, I just decided I didn't read blogs. I didn't listen to stuff about it. I didn't go to groups for me because I knew that my journey would look different than anyone else's. So I just said, God, you got to help me, each day. And that's what he did. And it's, so besides that, if you ever need to text me or you want to talk
Thank you.
outside
Yes.
that,
Yes. I'm in
I
the
didn't
learning
think I
process right now.
could do it. I honestly didn't think I could do it. I'm the baby of the family. I have one sister much older than me, and I didn't think I could do this, but I did it and honor my mom all through the whole process. And anyway, so you know how to reach me, and you can reach out to me too. And I'll,
Thank
not
you.
that everybody's journey is different for
Yeah.
any sickness, disease, or loss or grief. You've known that, but with your son, you guys honored him in such a way. You started this church and you named your church after your
Yes.
son. And so
Yes.
every time you walk in those doors, you have to think,
Yes.
God, we love you. We honor
Right.
your faithfulness and we honor the gift that you gave us.
Yes. Yeah. And the reason why we named it Journey, it wasn't just so that we can, name him after our son, but it was more so we wanted to start this church with his name. We actually had a different name, but we decided to name the church Journey because it was just a tribute to the idea that God could take something that's so sad and make something so beautiful out of it. And so that was the reason why it wasn't so that we can have something with his name on it, but more so to just commemorate that idea. God could take something, if you're watching something that's so difficult, something that you go through, and he can make something so beautiful out of it. There was actually a story of a woman who was thinking about aborting her child because she already had a few kids from a different relationship. And so we were blogging about our journey, and she decided not to abort her child because she saw everything that we were going through and how we were fighting so hard to have this child. Yet she has a child and she was ready to just easily give this baby up. And so she decided not to. And now what she does is she'll send us pictures of this baby every year, kind of a reminder that your son passed away, but because of your story, this baby has life. So that it's just another example of God taking this situation and making something beautiful out of it.
That's a beautiful testimony. The whole thing is such a beautiful testimony. And your church plant is how old is Journey Church now?
So it's going to be 9 years old in September. It's crazy. It's
And
wild.
I know this, but the church, start from nothing and it's exploded and can't keep enough empty space for new people to
Yes.
come, just growing and growing and growing. So God absolutely has his hand on the church and being raised in the ministry. And then you kind of veered off the path for a while. Did you think when you were a teenager, I probably am going to be a pastor when I grow up?
Oh no, never. No, I never thought that. As a matter of fact, when my husband and I were dating, like, when I got saved, little by little, I got involved in ministry. And I knew in my heart I wanted to do something in ministry, but I thought it was going to be like, I was going to be on the mission field somewhere because I love missions. And when I was dating my husband, I told him, I said, listen, I know that you love ministry. He was in an internship program leading it at the time. And so I told him, I will do anything in ministry but lead pastor. That's literally the words in which he told me, great, because I don't want to be a lead pastor either. And so we're like, perfect, this is a perfect match. And I thought that maybe one day we'll end up, in Africa somewhere as missionaries or something. And God had other plans. So definitely not in the plans at all. Not something I thought was going to happen.
And you're co-lead pastors, you both are lead pastors, you and JJ, which is, I love that God really does. He's like, yeah, go ahead, you say that. And I've got a plan, and this is what
Exactly.
I'm going to do. And
Yes.
I mean, you do it so well. You just, been listening to a lot of you guys' sermons and yours lately, just in preparing for this. And I love how you complement each other so beautifully. It really is a great partnership in leading. And we have been in ministry now almost 45 years. So
Wow.
I've,
That's my
you know, I've seen a lot, but I know there's always a surprise. I love to speak to people that also pastor in ministry and say, what surprised you the most? So
uh,
surprised you the most?
So I think the thing that surprised, well, first off, the growth of the church. I felt in my heart that God was going to do something in this church. His presence is just so tangible. And so I'm like, people are gonna flock to this, but I didn't know that it would grow as fast that it did. Also, one thing that was a pleasant surprise is that growing up, I always pictured a pastor or pastor's wife to look a certain way or act a certain way. Kind of like you said, like, when people encounter you, then, I know when people encounter me, they're like, if they say a curse word, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, I'm not judging you. But I always thought that I had to actually act a certain way and be a certain way. And so, like I told you, I had that period of time where I wasn't serving God. So the best way I can say is I'm Puerto Rican and my parents are from New York. And I always felt like I wasn't your typical pastor's wife because I listen to hip hop music and I like dance movies, like hip hop dance movies. And like, there's just so many little things here and there that when people encounter me, like on the street, because I talk to people, when they ask me what I do and I say I'm a pastor, they're just like, what? Like they would have never imagined, like if there was a game where you had to pick this person's a pastor, they would have never picked me. And so, but also because of that, sometimes when we first started the church, I thought, well, I feel like I have to act like someone else. I have to be quiet. I have to be reserved. I'm very loud. I'm super honest. Like I'm very transparent. And the pleasant surprise that I came to realize is that the church didn't want me to act like anyone else. They wanted me to be me. And when you're your authentic self, then you realize that people accept you for who you are. Like it, and that I feel like is one of the things that has allowed so many people to get connected to our church because my husband and I were so transparent of things that we've gone through, of situations. Sometimes the other day, my husband preached about sometimes there's been times where I question God. And that's okay, but bring your questions to God, like just things like that. And that has been a pleasant surprise, just knowing that if you're watching this, like people want to see the authentic you. They want to see you for who you really are, and they're gonna love you for that. Now, I'm not saying that, as a pastor, I could just do whatever and no, I mean obviously within reason. But I can be me, like loud, Puerto Rican, just unique me and just be authentic to who I am. And I love Jesus, and people are going to accept that.
Yes, to all of that. And I love that people want that. This generation wants that
Yes.
because they've had so many people give them a line and have not been authentic. And so to find someone that's authentic, I think it draws people in, and it's a great reflection of our Heavenly Father.
Yeah.
Because that's how He accepts us, and people are accepting us that way too. So, I mean, to pastor for 9 years and such a growing, thriving church and all the things you've gone through raising children and loss and celebrations, there has to be some rhythms or practices that have kept you grounded spiritually. What keeps you in there every day,
Yeah.
even when you haven't felt like it?
Right. Yeah. So practices, obviously community. We've talked about small groups, and so I also kind of have my own small group where I meet with the staff ladies once every other month, and so that's my community. I have other pastors' wives that I speak to, call, you stay in contact with. My devotional time with God, obviously, but some other practices that also help me and keep me grounded because ministry, can pull from 10 different ways. And even if you're not in ministry, just you have a job or a business, is that we have family day and date night every week without fail. So family days is on Fridays all day. Date night, sometimes it fluctuates what night of the week, but we always have date night, my husband and I. And that reassures and makes sure that we have time with the family, because what is the point of hustling and doing everything if you don't then enjoy the blessings that God has given you? So time with family, and then date night with my husband to keep that relationship going. And so those are some rhythms that I have to make sure that I stay grounded and spiritual And then now, because of you, we have our monthly dinners with the family. So with my mom, my dad, and my husband's parents, and so, and also in your podcast, you and your husband talked about how you would get so excited when your kids would call you, and I never realized that my parents they do get super excited, like, oh, do you want to hang out? Sure. Like, and so now when I call them, I think of you guys because I'm like, they're really excited. Like, I never thought about my parents being that excited to hang out with me and my husband's parents. So ever since that podcast, I've been hanging out more with my parents and with my husband's parents because I know, and it's helped me a lot too. I know that they enjoy it, and so do we.
I love that. And I'm thinking you're talking, I mean, because we said it on that episode, we just wait. We're so excited because we're by ourselves
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
And you guys aren't, and our kids aren't. They're busy and we're like just
Exactly.
sitting, waiting, like for the phone to ring. We're
Exactly.
so excited. So we still do. We love it when they call, and we really don't ever say no. We'll change our
Yeah. Yep, that's what my parents will do.
and
Yep,
those you won't regret that. I mean,
exactly.
your mom is walking through this challenging disease right now. Even if she weren't, we never know what's next around the
Yeah,
corner for any of us.
exactly.
Time invested and the ones we love, family and our community, it's never time wasted, right?
Exactly.
And you will have such amazing memories and zero regrets. You will look
Yeah,
back and go, yes, I built the relationship and I loved and honored. And I think that is just a beautiful thing, what you're doing. And God will bless it to abundance. And you won't lose time, it's gaining time. So I love that you protect that with you and JJ too, that special time together. I guess one of the questions I was going to ask is, how do you protect your family in the middle of this, growing church that you both lead? Because when you have both parents that are a leader, whether it's in a church or two parents that work full time and have very demanding jobs, you have to work to protect
yes,
family. And just because your kids are schooled at home doesn't mean that there's quality time. You've had to,
right.
like you mentioned in your family day, it's a
Yeah,
challenge, right?
right. It is. Yes, it definitely is. Especially when we're tired, maybe, and we just, I mean, sometimes we'll just lay on the couch and watch movies with them, and they're okay with that. But yeah, just because because I homeschool my kids doesn't mean that we have that quality time with, and we have check-ins with them too. Because I know for me growing up with my father being in ministry, I did feel like he was working for the church a lot and maybe wasn't spending a lot of time with the family. And so I learned from that, like, all I have to do is ask my kids, hey, do you feel like mom and dad are spending enough time with you? Yes, definitely. And my husband actually does something called, they call it We Dem Boys time. That basically means, I think that's like a football reference. I'm not sure. It's their thing.
It is because
Yeah.
I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, and
Okay, that's
that's
what it
the
is.
slogan for the Dallas Cowboys. So I
Gotcha.
know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so they call it Weedham Boys Time, where they spend Saturdays for a few hours together, just them. Because I have just boys, so he spends quality time just with them, where they can talk about all boy stuff. So that's another thing that he does with them too. And we check in on them. Hey, do you feel like mom and dad have not spent enough time with you? And they'll let us know, honestly. And for the most part, no, because we have those systems in place to make sure that we are spending enough time together.
That is beautiful what you just said. If somebody needs to rewind to hear that again, if not, I'm going to say it again for you. You said you've got systems in place, but just because you have them in place, you're not just making the assumption that your system is working all
Yes.
the time. So just ask your kids. You ask
Yeah.
them, are we doing a
Right.
good job? Are we
Yeah.
spending time together? What would
Right.
you like to see different? I mean, what could we do to be
Exactly.
better parents?
Yeah.
What a great, humble way to come before your children and say,
Yeah.
help us out here. You know,
Yeah.
I
They'll
love
tell
that.
you. The kids are on it.
That is gold. That is such a beautiful thing that you said that I hope, people that are parents or will be parents one day will stop and listen to what you said. And that it just makes you such a better parent to let your children have the freedom and the space to be able to say if there's an issue. I love that. Boy, time goes surely fast on these
I
podcasts.
know.
I because I have a son that's planted a church, and I have another son that's a pastor, and I have a third son. He's a pharmacist. We always tell him he's the smart one. He chose pharmacy, but the ones that pastor, and I know the life they live, and that we lived in ministry. So all the challenges you face, but and all the blessings and miracles you've experienced, which are crazy amount. So what's something, as we start to wind down, what is one of those moments or a story from your life since you've planted the church that you look back and say, only God? Maybe it's with the church or your family or your marriage, but you can look back and the first thing that pops to your mind, you're like, only God. That only has happened because of God.
I would have to say, and I'll make it short because I know we're running low on time, but it would have to be my husband's struggle with pornography. And so that's part of our story. We actually wrote a book about it recently called Finally Free, because my husband was struggling with pornography while pastoring. And so it was a really difficult situation to go through. Again, it was something that I had to draw on, the death of my son and different things to know that God is going to be faithful through it. But there were times where I'm like, I don't know we're going to get through this. Like, this is really tough. But only God could heal him to the point where, I mean, he struggled with this since he was a teenager, and he's now in his 30s. That's definitely an addiction. And God healed him from that, and me too. It wasn't just him. I needed healing too. He healed us both to the point where our relationship has gotten so much stronger through it. It was another trial that brought us closer together, closer to God and closer together. So I would have to say that's only God. There is no way that someone gets healed from that addiction without God. He's the only one who could do that.
I saw when the book was launched, and we will have, when this episode is dropped, we will definitely have the link to that book because, you at the very end of a podcast, drop this story to us and to people listening, and it affects that when you talk about pornography, and the fact is it's affected so many relationships, marriages, people, children, when they watch their one of their parents go through that. So everybody knows somebody.
Yeah.
Day and age, and so many people are affected and don't feel like there's a way out or that they can get through it. It's like it's the God, you can do so many things, but this one is too hard.
Yeah.
And I
Mm-hmm.
love that when you say, but only God, I love those kind of stories because you can explain away a lot of things. Well, we did this, we did that. But when you know
Yes.
that God stepped in
Yep.
and said, you put in the work, JJ, and
Exactly.
I'm gonna
Right.
fix this for you. I'm gonna heal
Yeah.
you. I want to. He
Yeah.
God wants to, right? He
Yeah.
doesn't want us to walk in addiction. He
Yeah.
wants to help us get out of that. And
Right.
he wrote a whole
Yeah.
book about it.
Yeah.
He wants the Bible,
Right.
and people struggle. So
Right.
I have been able to read a lot about the book, and maybe one day, maybe in the future, both of you can come on. But in the
Yeah.
meantime, when people hear this or watch it, that they would know that there's a story that someone has come through this, and their marriage is not just intact, it's
Yeah.
healthy and strong. And
Yes.
what empathy and love you could have for other people that struggle with
Yeah.
any kind of addiction, that you're able
Right.
to help them.
Yeah, and you could be in any other kind of addiction and read this book and understand it too. And the reason why we wanted to write it is because there's not a lot of books from the perspective of both the person who's going through it and the spouse. So not only is my husband writing, this is what I did. We, after each chapter he writes, there's a second part of that chapter called Liz's Lens. And so it shows like my perspective on what he just spoke about and what I did to help the situation. Because if it's a couple going through this, then there is something that the spouse can do, prayer, but just more than that. There's just so many things that perspective on how to understand all of this. And we just wanted a resource because we had so many people from church coming up to us asking us, like, how did you get through it? And we didn't do this to make money. We just literally did it so we could put everything that we learned in a tiny book. It's not even that big, that we could just be like, here, if we ever sat in a meeting with you, this is literally all the things we would tell you, but it's in a book and you can read it and it's so short. It will probably take you a day and this will help you.
I love that. I'm so glad. And I was hoping that you would, when I asked you that question, you would bring that up because I our life, we never arrive to the place that we're not going to go through a battle of some
Yes.
sort. And
Mm-hmm.
you are such a testament and testimony to God's faithfulness, and your husband and your children and the church that you represent at Journey Church. What an amazing picture of God's faithfulness. If someone were to think God doesn't do those kinds of miracles anymore.
Yes, it still
Yes,
does.
he does. And I love that. And so to, wrap up this podcast today, and I surely don't want to, but we need to. What would you say to someone in closing that's listening to remind them of God's faithfulness? Just a word of wisdom to close it out, and then we'll pray before we end it. But what would you say? They're thinking, yeah, well, that's your story, and you were in ministry, and you were
Right.
Christian, and your
Right.
husband's a Christian.
Yeah.
But that doesn't work for me. What would you tell them about God's
Yeah,
faithfulness?
I would tell them, if you really, really, and I've preached this before, because I realize that, like, I have a totally different story than some of you or than any of you that are listening, because my story is different and unique. If you really sat down and just took a moment and thought about ways that God has shown up in your life, like if you took a notebook and you just wrote it out, and sometimes I've done this, like in my prayer time, just when you're stressed out about all the things that are currently happening, but you just sit down and write down, he did this, and then he did that, and then he did this, and he did that. In the Bible, when something, a miracle would happen, or God would do something, sometimes the Israelites would make like a monument, like a monument, just so that they can, when they come back to that place, it was like a reminder that God did this, so that they wouldn't forget when they're in their current situations, he did this, so then he could do it again. If God did it before, he can do it again. So if you're watching, just take a moment after this podcast and write down, think about it. There are things that God has done in your life. Sometimes you don't realize it. Whether it be, for me, it was a car accident. The fact that I could have died, in so many different situations that I put myself through. Just like all the things that I have already shared. The fact that I have kids after having an abortion, that's another part of my testimony. I had an abortion. Like, there's so many things, but God helped me through it. Just all of those things. And I'm here and I'm a pastor. What? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. But he keeps showing up. And so if you just sit down and take a moment and write down all the things that God has done in your life, when you sit down and you look how long that list is, even if it's short, you look at that list and you say, okay, God, you did that before when I thought that you couldn't do it. You're going to do it again in this current situation. Why would you not be faithful if you were faithful before? It's not like God stops and says, okay, you know what? I'm done being faithful for you. No, his faithfulness continues on. And so I would definitely say that. Just take a moment and think, what has he done before in your life? Because he's going to do it again.
That is
It might not be the way you think he's going to do it, but he's going to do it again.
That is what a wonderful word to close this out. I just feel, the presence of God, even just listening, sitting through this computer screen, recording this with you, I feel that's a word for not just one person, but many people, what you just said, for them about God's faithfulness, that are questioning it or wondering or thinking God might have forgotten me, or I've used up his faithfulness. God had, he had a certain amount and I used it all up. And so he doesn't replenish.
Right, exactly.
Would you pray for those? You know what I love about podcasts? You don't know that, some people listen the day it comes out, and then months down the road, somebody might come across this. But to know that God doesn't make a mistake, and he has people listening and watching who need to hear this message. And so would you just pray for those who may tune in and not even know how they found Table Talks, and like, I don't know is how did I find this, but that God has a word for them. Would you pray over people that might listen? Thank you.
Dear Heavenly Father, God, we thank you for today. Thank you for Kay and this podcast, God. We just pray right now for those who are listening to this podcast. Maybe they're going through a current struggle. We all have current struggles. We all have a situation that we're worried about. We all have a situation that we don't know how it's going to turn out. We all have a situation that we're scared about, worried about. Sometimes we toss and turn at night thinking about it, worried about it. What's going to be the outcome? We get anxious about it. We just pray right now for whatever current situation that these people are going through, that we're going through, that I'm going through, that we would just take a moment and remember your faithfulness, God, that you've done it before and that you're going to do it again. So I pray that after listening to this podcast, that they would have the faith to know that you've shown up before in their lives. Maybe they haven't realized it. Maybe they have to take a moment and think about it, but you've shown up before and you're going to show up again. It might not come out the way that we think it's going to come out, by the method, by the format, but it's going to come out the way that you intended, the best way, God, because you are our Heavenly Father who cares so much about us, and you have a perfect plan for our lives, God. So I just pray that that plan would come forth, even if we have to go through these trials and these struggles, because we're going to be better for it in the end. We're going to be closer to you, closer to our family members, our spouses. You're going to do the miracle, God. And I pray that these people who are watching today would see them as miracles. All of these are miracles, a million little miracles happening in their lives, God. We thank you and we ask you all these things in your name. We pray. Amen.
Amen. Wow. Thank you. I'm just blessed. We're all blessed for your honesty and your story and what God's done in your life. And I so appreciate you saying yes to being on the podcast and being with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me today on Table Talks. For more content and information about upcoming episodes, please visit my website at kwoodward.com. You can also explore other podcast links and resources there. Until next time.